Welcome. We are really glad that you are able to join us tonight for the Redbud chapter presentation of a photographic tour of the genus Calochortus by Jeff Bisbee. We're in for a special treat tonight, and of this genus Calochortus, which includes the glorious Mariposa lilies, fairy lanterns, star tulips, and many more. Before we get started on Jeff's presentation, I'd like to give a brief introduction to the Redbud chapter of the California Native Plant Society. The Redbud chapter was founded almost 30 years ago to serve Nevada and Placer counties, and currently has approximately 400 members. Our chapter has published comprehensive field guides featuring over 700 of the native wildflowers, trees, and shrubs of our 2 counties, which is an amazing feat in itself, given the diversity and richness of our local native flora. There are more than 2,000 species in just our 2 counties. The Redbud members lead field trips, host presentations such as this one, advocate on behalf of native plants and their habitat, grow native plants, and hold plant sales. And we do a lot of other things too. Whatever your interest is in California native plants, we invite you to attend our events, visit our website, Facebook page, YouTube channel, and Instagram account. And there's no experience or expertise necessary to get involved. Come for the beauty and wonder of learning about and exploring our native plants. On that note, I would like to introduce renowned botanist and photographer Jeff Bisbee. Enjoy his presentation of this genus of bulbs native to California and elsewhere on our continent. Calochortus is divided into 3 sections: Calochortus, Mariposa, and Cyclobothra. Botanists further divide each section into 4 subsections. Jeff will share about each subsection, including distinguishing characteristics. I have been privileged to attend Jeff's 2 prior presentations to the Redbud chapter, one on Arctostaphylos and one on Ceanothus, and they were both wonderful. So, as I said, in for a treat tonight. Jeff was raised in Grass Valley, a rural setting where he developed a passion for native plants. His father worked for the Forest Service and got him started on trees, and then his interest spread from there to other types of plants. He loves photographing and documenting the plants and has had many of his photographs published, including in the book Conifers Around the World. And he also did the photography for the field guide to manzanitas and has since extensively photographed other genera such as Ceanothus, Calochortus, Laelia, Lilium, and Erythronium. His latest interest is in the genus Aragonium, the buckwheats, with its 300 plus species. He is also a propagator. He cultivates many native plants from seed and has an extensive collection of Mexican and Western conifers on his family property in Colfax, and has contributed some of these conifers to the UC Santa Cruz Arboretum. He also enjoys cultivating Arctostaphylos and Ceanothus. He's currently living in Gardnerville, Nevada, which gives him easy access to many of the Calochortus species of the Eastern Sierra, and you'll get to see the results of this access. So welcome. Please join me in thanking Jeff for coming tonight.
Well, thank you for having me. Just want to mention this is going to be more of a visual presentation, not too technical. I'm not an expert on Calochortus. I'm an admirer, like most of you are, of the genus, and I've had the opportunity to see almost all the species in the United States. There's only one variety of Calochortus elegans that I haven't seen, and it's actually the main variety. I've seen the 2 ones with a more restricted range. I just haven't been at the right place at the right time to see that one. There's around 68 species of Calochortus, depending on which ones you recognize or not. And my first encounter with Calochortus was growing up in Grass Valley. We lived on Meadow Drive near the end of the road, and behind the bus stop there was a field, and it must have been towards the end of the school year. After school, I just decided to explore back in the grassy area there behind the field, and I saw these amazing flowers, these flowers. They were white, lavender, all different shades, and with these really interesting markings. I was about 10 years old, and I was really impressed with these, and turned out to be a Calochortus superbus. And then at that time, I was very interested in plants, and I realized right away that it was a Calochortus. And it's interesting because to this day, that population is still the most variable population of Calochortus superbus that I've seen. There's some really deep purple ones, which are pretty unusual, and everywhere from that to white. But unfortunately, it was still there in 2009. I went back to take a look at them, and I went back a few years ago, and they had built a house right on top of the main part of the population there, and a big wooden fence all around the yard. So it's like pretty much the whole thing was gone. Like I say, I'm not an expert on Calochortus, so if you have any questions, make sure they're pretty easy ones. Otherwise, I might not know the answer. Let's see here. Okay, so I'm trying to. All right, so now I'm not able to switch slides. Let me see what's going on here. Okay. All right, let me try this again. Let's see, screen share. Share. Okay, there we go. Okay, so Calochortus is part of the lily family, and there's in California there's 8 genera. Used to be a lot more. They've been taking out genera little by little, and these are the 8 that are left in California. California is very well represented with Lilium. There's around 21 species of Lilium, the true lilies in California, especially if you go up to northwestern California, there's one single road there that has 7 species just on one road. So California is very well represented. Erythronium is also part of the lily family, and it's also very well represented in California. Fritillaria is part of the lily family, and as you will see towards the end of the presentation, Calochortus actually has a pretty close connection with Fritillaria. You wouldn't think so, but when you see some of the species down in southern Mexico, then you'll see the connection there. Calochortus is often compared to the tulips. Tulips are from the Mediterranean, especially the Eastern Mediterranean. These are not my photos. I haven't been to any of these places. I got them off of the internet, but you can see, some of the similarities there with the Calochortus. This is where Calochortus grow. As you can see, they're mostly in the western United States. They do invade the northern plains there on the western side of North and South Dakota. You see that one dot way out there in eastern Nebraska. That's probably not based on a native plant. But also notice that they avoid the wet, rainy part of the Pacific Northwest. They're very well represented in the interior part of the Pacific Northwest, but there's none at all in the northwestern corner there. Now, like we were mentioning earlier, the Calochortus is divided into 3 sections, and each section is divided into 4 subsections. So I'm going to go through the genus one section at a time. But before we get into the different sections, I just wanted to show you what is native to Nevada County. You have 7 species in Nevada County. 3 of them are in the section Mariposa, Luteus, Superbus, and Lechlinii, and they're all 3 in the same section of Mariposa, the Venusti. And then the other 4 are in the Calochortus section, and the 3 of the different subsections are represented here in Nevada County. So starting. we're going to start with the section Calochortus. Now, this section has fruit that are three-winged, as you can see in the photograph there. They're very flat wings. The other two sections, they're described as angled, and they're always erect. They're never nodding, and they're long, narrow. In this section, they're usually elliptic or orbicular. And another easy way to identify this Mariposa lily from this section is by the leaf. You see they have a persistent basal leaf that is still quite green and healthy looking when the plant is blooming. And they're sheath-like, which is kind of like a blade of grass kind of wraps around the stem there. And also the bulbs have a membranous onion-like bulb coat, and they're predominantly a northern distribution, Northern California and the Pacific Northwest. These are the four subsections of the section Calochortus, and we're going to get into these one by one, starting with Puchelli. These are the globe lilies, or the fairy lanterns. There's 6 species in California, and they're almost entirely confined to California. Albus goes a little bit into northern Baja, but they don't go into Oregon or Nevada at all. Calochortus albus, the white globe lily, as you can see on the map there, it has 2 main areas of distribution, the Sierra foothill, which is one form, and then you have the coastal form, which, as you can see, it's, I don't know, how would you describe it, a little fatter than the foothill form. It's more round. Also the sepals are usually pink or reddish colored, and while those of the Sierra are usually yellow or greenish. And some people also distinguish the ones down there in San Diego County as being another form. And they're actually, interestingly, more similar to the ones in the Sierra than they are the ones that are close by on the coast. Now, when you get down in San Luis Obispo and Monterey County, you have some of these populations of these deep red globe lilies, and they're sometimes distinguished as a variety of albus. But it's kind of hard to really distinguish them because, as you can see in the photograph there on the right, this is from a population in San Luis Obispo County, which is considered one of the best populations of these red-colored globe lilies. And you have a lot of red ones, but also mixed in, you have white ones and pink ones. So it seems like it's more just a color form instead of really a true variety. In the North Coast, you have this one here, the golden globe lily. Sounds like it would be something from Hollywood, Calochortus amabilis. And it's interesting because this one starts just to the north of the Bay Area, and then albus starts just to the south of the Bay Area. They don't really overlap at all. This is quite common if you go over in Napa and Sonoma County, all the way up to Humboldt County. And interestingly, there's a little population in the valley over there, just west of Red Bluff. And I was just driving by Highway 36, and whoa, that looks like some amabilis there, and I didn't know that they were actually in the Sacramento Valley there. In the Southern Sierra, you have this amazing one here. It's just such a amazing deep rose-colored globe lily, and these ones do overlap with albus in the Yosemite area, but there hasn't been any hybrids recorded between these two, which you think would be very interesting if there was. If they're closely related, you think they could. Now, there's 2 globe lilies with a restricted range. One is on Mount Diablo, the Calochortus pulchellus. if you want to see those, you can go right to the top of Mount Diablo. There's a little trail there that goes around the top of the mountain, and there's plenty of them along that trail there. And they usually bloom around the beginning of June up there at 3,800 feet. And then you have this one here, Calochortus reichii, which is endemic of a serpentine area called the Cedars over in Sonoma County, named after Roger Reich. He's one of the ones who's done a lot of botanizing there in the Cedars. And in order to see these, you have to be escorted in there by one of the property owners. Roger's one of them. Or you can hike into Austin Creek State Park. They had one of the fires burned through last year, so I'm not sure if it's been reopened yet. But you can hike down. You have to go a long ways down a hill through a redwood forest, and you can see the serpentine area because you see a little patch of Sargent cypress, which are the ones you see in this photograph here. And I went down there several years ago, and it was too early. Reichii is a very late bloomer. When Amabilis, which grows in the area, is just finishing blooming, Reichii is just barely beginning to bloom. So I went there at the end of, or I guess it was about the middle of May, and I just found plants that were in bloom. But one warning: if you get down there, don't get lost, because when I went down there, it's quite a ways down there. I didn't go on the trail. I just kind of went straight down the hill. And when I was ready to leave, I started looking around, and I had no idea which way I'd come from, which, usually I'm very good with directions. I don't usually follow the trails, but so I got out my phone and I had a map, and I said, well, let me see if I can determine on my map. And I didn't have my glasses on, and I went to touch something, and I immediately deleted my map. So I was like, oh, great, which way do I go? So I was able to kind of find my way up to a little clearing up on a hill and kind of get my bearings, and I was able to get out of there. But Ron Parsons, he's also he's the one who did the book on Calochortus. He said the same thing happened to him, that they went down there and they almost got lost. So anyway, just a warning. But anyway, the Cedars is an amazing place. It's this bare serpentine rock surrounded by redwood forest, and it's very open and gets very hot. There's a lot of very rare endemic plants in there. You have the manzanita that you see here, Arctostaphylos bakeri, the subspecies sublavis, which is mostly found only in that area. And there's also endemic buckwheat, Eriogonum cedrorum. I don't know how you pronounce that. Anyway, so now we're moving on to the eleganti section, and this is let's see. These are the cat's ears, and you're probably familiar with Monophyllus, which is very common in the Grass Valley area. They're bell-like, upright orientation. They're very hairy on the inner surface of the petals. That's the name, cat's ears. And there's 7 species of cat's ears, eleganti. And we're going to start with the most widespread species. This is Tonyai, which you see on the map there. It goes from the Bay Area to almost to Portland, very common in northwestern California. And it's a very variable species. There's some very small forms of it, and then there's some very large forms that are, they're like a foot tall and fairly large flowers. And they're usually white, but as you see here, it can range from white to pink to deep, deep purple. And probably the most distinct form is the one in the lower left. That's the one that's in San Mateo County in the Bay Area. And it's very, very tiny. It grows in a real shaded areas, a lot of times under redwood forest. And it's, as you see, it has very short and sparse hairs. It's not like a typical Tonyai. And so a lot of people think that this one might even be another species. It's very distinct. And if you look on the map there, you see that Tonyai is pretty much lacking in the Sierra Nevada. You see one blob there in the northern Sierra, that's in Butte County, where it is actually pretty common up there and around Paradise and the Jarbro Gap area. And it's growing there with Monophilus. This population here is the most intense purple Tonyais, or as far as that goes, of any Calochortus that I've seen. These are along the coast south of Fortuna up in Humboldt County. And it's a very high, windy, cold ridgetop. It's up about 2,500 feet. Every time I've been there, the wind has been blowing like 40, 50 miles an hour. And it was very hard to take pictures because the flowers were moving all over. So you just like take like hundreds of pictures and then you delete all the ones that are blurry because of the wind. But this is a very amazing population. They're all deep purple. There's some that are not quite as deep as others, but pretty much the entire population there are these deep purple colored. Now, there's 3 different white cat's ears in Northern California. And sometimes it can be a little confusing to try to identify which one you're looking at. If you know the range, it helps. For instance, if you're in the Sierra Nevada, not in Butte County, but anywhere else in the Sierra Nevada, it's going to be Caruleus because that's the only one that's there. But if you're in northwestern California, then there's some areas where you have all 3 of them growing pretty much in the same area. Tonyai generally is a more lower elevation plant. Elegans is extreme northwestern California in the Siskiyou Mountains, and also it's in the Marble Mountains and a few other areas up there. It's generally a pretty high elevation alpine species. And the first thing to look for is the look at the anthers. Tonyai has very small anthers, as you can see in the picture here in comparison, in proportionate with the flower. Caruleus has very large oblong anthers that are very blunt on the ends. Tonyai, they can be blunt to pointed, but not apiculate. Elegans has apiculate anthers. The tips are very, you can see on the photo there, they're very narrow, sharp point. And both Caruleus and Elegans are unbranched. Tonyai is usually branched. It usually has a couple different branches. So, but not always. So that's not always a very reliable. And also, if you look at the petals, you see Tonyai on the left there, the margin on the petal is entire. It's not ciliate or fringed. Caruleus is very fringed margin, and Elegans also to a lesser degree. Elegans, they say, usually has much less hair towards the tip of the petal, and the petals are usually pointed, but that's not always either. The biggest problem usually is trying to distinguish Caruleus from Elegans up in the high mountains in northwestern California, but usually the anthers are what's going to give you the best indications. If they have very round, blunt ends, then it's probably a Caruleus. And down in the southern Sierras, you have another cat's ear down there. That's a very interesting one. It's down around Shirley Meadows, kind of northeast of Bakersfield, and there's quite a few other locations, as you can see there on the map. And it's very low to the ground, and it has very interesting brown markings on the inside of the petal. It's one of my favorite cat's ears. And up in the Pacific Northwest, there's 2 species up there, and they're both fairly large plants. Flowers are larger than typical cat's ears, and they're very similar to each other. Piculatus has a black spot at the base of the petal, and the subalpinus does not. They are well separated geographically. The subalpinus is in the Central Cascades from Mount Adams to about Central Oregon, and Piculatus is up in the Northern Rockies and into Canada. A good place to see that one is on the Going to the Sun Highway in Glacier National Park. especially on the east side of Logan Pass. There's a lot of them there. And a good place to see the subalpinus is, you see there, Mount Hood. Just go right up to the ski resort there, Timberline Lodge, and they're all over up there. You can't miss them. But we're going to the third subsection, the Nudi. These are the naked star tulips, as they're called, because they pretty much lack hair. There's only 4 species in this subsection. Umbellatus is a serpentine endemic down in around the Bay Area. The common name is the Oakland star tulip. It's on Ring Mountain, where the Tiburonensis calochortus is also found, but it blooms much earlier. It's a very early bloomer, like late March, early April. Uniflorus is also mostly on the coast. It does kind of go inland a little bit in Northern California, but it's pretty much usually a lower elevation coastal plant. It goes from San Luis Obispo County, like well up into Washington and Oregon. Nudist and minimus are pretty similar to each other. As you see on the map, if you look in the Nevada County area, you have people who have posted photos of both of them in Nevada County, but don't expect to find 2 different species there, because it's just a matter of, okay, one person calls it minimus and one person is calling the same plant nudist. How do you distinguish the two? Well, nudist has erect seed capsules, as you see in the photo there, and minimus has nodding capsules. Nudist is generally a larger plant. A lot of times it has color, ranges from white to deep purple. Minimus is much smaller. Petals are somewhat pointed on the ends usually, and they're almost always white. And so what is it that we have here in Nevada County? Well, you see on the first row there, if you look at the seed capsules, they're nodding, which would indicate minimus, but the flowers are fairly large. They're larger than typically minimus are, and they usually have some color. Also, they grow in fairly dry areas. Nudist is usually in fairly moist meadows, while minimus is more of a drier areas it grows in. And so what is it in Nevada County then? Well, it's what they consider a transition between nudist and minimus. It's showing some characters of each. So it's not really clear which one they are. And as you go south of Lake Tahoe, like the bottom row there, those were taken near Wrights Lake in El Dorado County. They're starting to look much more like minimus, but they still have a few little things that kind of look like nudists. Like a lot of them have like a pale lavender color, and they're much smaller than the ones you see in Nevada County, especially at the ones in higher elevation in El Dorado County. But if you go down lower elevation, like in Highway 88, there's some down around the 4,000 foot level, and those ones are looking more like the ones in Nevada County again. They have a little bit larger flower with a little color. So we're kind of in a transition zone here between the 2 species. The last subsection is Nittidae, and this is a very interesting subsection. It consists of 9 species, and they're mostly in the Pacific Northwest. Persistens, Greeneye and Longhi barbados are found in California. The rest of them are not found in California. And persistens is actually a California endemic. It's only found on a couple mountain tops near Wairika, serpentine areas, and it gets the name persistens because of you see the petals after they dry out, they stay on, they don't fall off, so they persist. And it's a very beautiful species. It's one of my favorite. And I went up there last year to take some pictures, and I was seeing a lot of other things in Southern Oregon. And so by the time I got up there on Gunsight Ridge, the sun was going down. And so I thought, oh, great, they're going to be closed. The flowers are going to be closing up at night. And so I was surprised that in this section of Calochortus, the flowers don't close at night. I was used to like Superbus and some of the other ones in that section, and the Mariposa section, they close up at night, but these ones don't. So I was able to take pictures first thing in the morning, bright and early. Greeneye and Longhi barbados are up in Northern California. Greeneye is a fairly narrow endemic, grows in the northern Shasta Valley, like kind of north of Wairika. And it does go a little bit into southern Oregon, Jackson County. Longhi barbados is more mostly outside of California, eastern Oregon, Idaho. And if you look at compared in the photos to Greeneye, you know, they look kind of similar, especially looking from the outside. But if you look on the inside, they're very different. Greeneye has a dense yellow hair at the base of the petal, and the inside of the petal is pretty hairy all the way to the apex. And Longhi barbados, which means long beard or long hair, as you see, it has very long hairs, but they're very sparse. And so, and actually it's a much smaller flower than Greeneye. Greeneye is a pretty large, showy flower, and blooms pretty late. It blooms like late June when it's very hot up there in the Shasta Valley. Longhi barbados has one variety, which is in one mountain range up there in central Oregon. And it's very small. It's like barely taller than the short grass that it grows in. So it's easy to miss these. And it's interesting that it's a triploid, and so it's unable to reproduce by seed. So it's interesting that it's been able to survive and persist for all this time. These are two interesting ones that are not in California. Laelia, it grows east of the Cascades in northern Washington, and it's up there around Leavenworth, if you're familiar with that area. And it's a very interesting species. It's pretty good sized flower. Plants they can be anywhere from up to 18 inches tall. Eurycarpus is it's much more widespread. It goes from eastern central Oregon all the way across Idaho into Wyoming, and it's fairly common up there, especially up around Boise, north of Boise. And a good place to see this one is a place called Hat Point, which is up in the extreme northeastern corner of Oregon. It's a very remote area. It's a long drive. It's pretty much in the middle of nowhere. And you see on the picture there on the left, on a good year, there's literally millions and millions of these flowers there. And behind you are the Seven Devils Mountains in Idaho, and in front of them is the Snake River Canyon, which is 7,000 feet deep, the deepest canyon in the United States at this point here. And so there's a lot of overlooks there looking into the canyon. It's a very interesting area to visit. And if you look on the map, there's one dot way down there to the south of the main population. That's in Nevada, and yes, that's accurate. There's a population in the Ruby Mountains in Nevada, and it's very easy to get to them. You just take the road up to Lamoille Canyon out of Elko there and go all the way to the end. Their flowers are blooming right around the parking lot, and just before you get to the parking lot, there's some in the grassy areas there. And if you want to see them, that's the closest place from Grass Valley to go see this the species of Calochortus. And you're still in time because they bloom there in late July. So they're probably this year seems a little early, so they're probably already starting to bloom right now. So within the next couple of weeks is a good time to get up there and see them. And the Ruby Mountains are actually a very interesting place. It's surrounded by dry Nevada desert, and it's actually a very green mountain range. They get about 40 to 45 inches of rain, which is the most of any mountain range in the Great Basin region. And it's really green up there, you know, amazingly in the middle of summer, even like seems greener than the Sierras. They get more summer rain up there, and it reminds me a lot of the Sierras, the Rocky Mountains there. And this is another fairly narrow endemic up in northwestern Idaho, and there's a few populations in the adjacent areas of Washington, and it's a very beautiful, showy, really large flower. They think that it may be related to Eurycarpus, and maybe from an ancient cross between Eurycarpus and Longhi barbados, because the shape of the flower is kind of like Longhi barbados, but it has a very large flower like Eurycarpus. It retains that large size. So it's a hard one to see because it's only in a few remote areas, but it's a very beautiful species. And when I was up there photographing it, I saw this one here with 6 petals. So it's kind of a freak. These 3 species, Coxii, Howlii, and Umquensis, are local endemics in southwestern Oregon. They don't make it into California. Coxii is a very beautiful species. It kind of reminds me of persistence. It's a serpentine endemic. It just grows in a few areas southeast of Roseburg and the Myrtle Creek area. Howlii is also a serpentine endemic. It's much closer to California. It's on the Highway 199. If you go down from Grants Pass to Crescent City, there's a couple of serpentine areas there where these are growing, and it's a very large, showy species. Big white flowers. I think they're bigger than even like most of the Venustus and Superbus. It's a very big, showy flower, and these are growing in very hot serpentine areas. If you've ever been to Grants Pass and Medford in the summertime, it gets really hot there. And when I took these pictures, it was about 105 degrees. They bloom. This one blooms fairly late, in late June. And Umquensis, it looks similar, but there's a lot of important differences. For instance, the fruit is nodding. It's not erect like you see in the photo there, the upper right of Howlii. And it's also blooms earlier. It blooms, even though it's further north, growing in a wetter, cooler area. It blooms late May, early June. And it doesn't have the green at the base of the petal like you see on the photo there of Howlii. It's more of a yellow. And there's 3 different varieties, and they're just small populations, each variety, and they're separated by 30 or 40 miles apart in some remote areas up there in Oregon. Now, giving you a little tip here where you can see some of these species here in the section Calochortus, Nudist and Longhi barbados. If you go on Highway 89 north of Boerne, there's a place there, it's at mile marker 4050, and it's an amazing spot there because they have all kinds of rare plants growing there, including Longhi barbados. The first time I saw Longhi barbados, it was way up in Modoc County in the middle of nowhere. You had to go like 30 miles on a dirt road to find them, and I only found a few flowers, and I didn't know that they were much closer and over there in Shasta County, right on the side of a major highway. And also at the same spot, you have 2 species of Fritillaria. You have Atropurpurea and Recurva, two species of Calochortus, and some people have found hybrids between Longhi barbados and Nudist, which would be a very interesting hybrid to see. And also you have Erythronium fawn lily, the Chlamycensis, growing there, which there's only a few places where you can see that. It's a pretty rare species. It blooms much earlier than the Calochortus, blooms at the end of April. And there's also a Brodea that's not very common in California. It's more common up to the north, Brodea rosea. And so it's a very interesting spot. Unfortunately, last year when I was driving by there, it's like they were doing thinning the forest along Highway 89, and they really did a lot of damage to this spot. They, you know, I don't have a problem with thinning the forest if it's done, you know, in a responsible way, but they took a bulldozer and they pushed up big piles of slash right where a lot of the bulbs were growing, and they drove the bulldozer across the meadow, and it's like I'm sure, you know, it'll recover, but they did a lot of damage because of not knowing it was a sensitive area, unfortunately. And another hot spot for this section of Calochortus is the Mount Shasta area. They have so many different rare Calochortus growing in that area. These are some of the ones found there. It's also a good place to see Macrocarpus, which is not in the section Calochortus, but it's one of the easiest places in California to see that species. Now we're moving on to the section Mariposa. As I was mentioning to you, the fruit of this section, they're long and narrow. They're described as three-angled, not three-winged like the Calochortus section. As you see in the photograph here, they're definitely not flat wings on the seed capsule. The seeds are thin. They're like wafer-like. Those of the section Calochortus can be described more like boat-like, but the seeds of Calochortus are very thin and wafer-like. And this is the only section of the three Calochortus that close at night, and also during cloudy weather, dark cloudy weather, they'll close up. And I was thinking that all Calochortus did that. So like when I was trying to photograph some of the other species, I was rushing to try to get there, you know, before it was too late in the afternoon, because what often happens if you, with this section of Calochortus, if you get there 4 o'clock in the afternoon, they're already starting to close. So it doesn't make a very good photo to, you know, when the flower is not fully open. And also if you look at the leaves of this section, they're very different from the section Calochortus. They're not sheathing. Most species, the leaf is completely dried up and withered by the time the flower blooms, and you don't even hardly notice it. There's also 4 subsections in this section of Mariposa: Venusti, Macrocarpi, Natalya, and Genus. And I'm going to go through them one by one, starting with Venusti. Now, Venusti, these are the classic Mariposa lilies, you know, the beautiful, big, beautiful, colorful Mariposas, like Mariposa, like the Calochortus superbus, and luteus, which you're familiar with in Grass Valley area, Lavender. And there are 15 species in this subsection of Mariposa, subsection Mariposa, and more than any other of the subsections. And these are almost entirely in California. They don't go into Oregon. They do go slightly into Nevada. Flexulosis is in Nevada. And there's some species that go into southern Nevada. There's one species that's mostly outside of California. It only enters into California in the Death Valley area. Here's some more species of the subsection Venusti. And one species is extinct. You see in the lower right-hand corner there, Calochortus mananthus. That was collected in 1876 near Wairika. There's a lot of rare localized endemics Calochortus up in that area, and this was one of them. It was collected in 1876. They said there was 6 flowers. It's very distinct. We can still see that by looking at the dried specimens, the pressed specimens here. It was pink, and it was growing along the banks of the Shasta River in a serpentine area. And it had never been seen since 1876, unfortunately. And now that area, there's a lot of cattle ranching and agriculture being done in that valley. In the course of the Shasta River has been diverted, and so people have looked for it, but there's no sign of it. Seems like it's completely gone forever. This is a Calochortus superbus. They're usually white, especially lower elevations tend to be more white. The upper elevations where it grows, which is usually in Grass Valley, Nevada City, it's usually 2,500 feet or so is the upper elevation for it. And those ones tend to be more colorful, more lavender flowers. There's also yellow superbus, believe it or not. I was surprised to find out this. And they're usually overlooked because people see them and they say, oh, those are luteus, but you can tell by the gland and the markings that they're actually yellow superbus, which are found in several areas. This one here, this is one of the more recently described Calochortus. This was described in 1993 from the McLeod River area northeast of Redding. The population that they found that they originally described was white. You see the 3 photos there, but later there was another population that was discovered in Tehama County, which had very beautiful yellow flowers. And it's in a very remote area. You have to drive like 30 miles on a dirt road to get to this spot. But it's worth the trip. It's a very beautiful flower. Calochortus striatus is the only striped Calochortus. These are found down in the Mojave Desert. You see on the map there. They're mostly down around Lancaster and Palmdale. They do make it into the southern tip of the San Joaquin Valley, and there's a little population of them right by Lake Isabella in Kern County, and then there you have some over there in Nevada. And the bottom 2 photos there, that's a little population in Red Rock Canyon, and they're a little bit different there. It's just a very small population, but as you can see, there's a lot of flowers in that small area. And this species grows in what do you call it? Alkali seeps and fairly moist areas. And the ones there in Red Rock Canyon are tetraploid, and they speculate that they may have originated from a cross between striatus and splendens, which is another Calochortus that grows in that area. This is an interesting one here, Calochortus flexulosis, the twining Mariposa lily. And as you can see why they call it that, it's actually like a Mariposa lily growing on a vine. And these are mainly in the Southwest or in Arizona, and go a little bit into Utah, and they go down into New Mexico also. And in California, the best place to see them is in Death Valley. Actually, if you go over Daylight Pass in Death Valley, they're just right there by the pass. And it's an early bloomer, like a lot of the stuff in the desert there blooms in late April. Now, Calochortus venustus is similar in a lot of ways to Calochortus superbus, but one of the things that distinguishes it is that it usually has an upper petal blotch, like you see in some of the photos here, but sometimes it doesn't. There's a lot of populations that don't have that upper petal blotch, but there is a very easy way to separate this from superbus, which I'll show you here in a little bit. You see the distribution there. They don't quite make it up to Nevada and Placer counties. They're just south of here. They're in El Dorado County on Highway 88, like east of Jackson up to like Pioneer and Pine Grove. There's a lot of nice populations of them in that area. And then they go all the way down through the Sierras into down to Los Angeles County, and then up the Coast Range up to the Bay Area. Now, this is the most variable Calochortus of any species when it comes to color and the patterns on the blotches. It's just completely amazing, the variety that you have in this species. If you took all the other Calochortus, all 68 other species of Calochortus, all the colors of them, well, Venustus has all those colors. It has every color you can imagine. And here's just going to show you some examples of some of the different colors that are found in this species. They even have like some browns. They have like pinks, reds, deep, almost like deep burgundy colors. And sometimes you'll have like all the different colors growing in the same little patch of Calochortus. You just like spend hours going and looking and taking pictures of each one. So it's totally amazing. And the more colorful ones tend to be in the south, Kern County and Fresno County, and at higher elevations. The lower elevation ones are generally white. It's kind of the same scenario with Calochortus superbus. Usually the lower elevation ones are white. So how do you tell it apart from superbus? And also there's another one in the North Coast range, Veste, which is also a very large, showy Calochortus, which is similar to Venustus and superbus. But there's an easy way to separate all three of these, and it's by looking at the gland. If you look on the upper photo there, superbus has a crescent-shaped gland at the base of the petal. Veste, which is around Clear Lake and Mendocino County, is sometimes growing in the same areas as superbus. That one has what they call a double gland. You see in the photo there, it looks like an M or a upside down W. And so, you know, if you take a look and you see that, then you know you're looking at Veste. Venustus has a big square gland, as you can see, completely different from superbus. So it's like no way to confuse them. All you got to do is take a quick look at the gland, and there you know which one you're looking at. One center for diversity for this subsection Venusti is down around San Luis Obispo County. They have many different species down there. And Calochortus splendens, they see in the center there, it's a pretty widespread species. It goes from the Bay Area down into Baja California. And there's down in the southern part, like Riverside, San Diego County, starting like down in Orange County to the south into Baja, you have plants that have, they don't have the long white hair like you see on splendens. They're like very short hair. The anthers are different. They're purple instead of light colored. And they actually looks very different. The flowers are more open, they say. And a lot of people think that this is actually a different species. It's been given the name Davidsonianus, which is not generally accepted currently, but as you can see, there's a big difference between the two. And then you go north of the Bay Area, there's a population up there in Walker Ridge, and there's a few other areas up there in the North Coast ranges, which look more like the southern ones down in San Diego County. They have the very short hairs, and there's also some very interesting differences. And so this is another population that they're looking at, which could possibly be a different species. Now we're going to go to the next subsection, Macrocarpi. It consists of one single species, Calochortus macrocarpus. It makes it into California, northeastern California. You see there, it's growing in front of Mount Shasta, a little bit to the east of Weed, which is probably right where that lava fire just burned. So actually, next year, if we have decent rain, there might be a lot of flowers, because usually after a fire, the Calochortus really take off because all the competition is gone. What makes this subsection different are these, you see the sepals. They're very long, narrow sepals that far exceed the petals. And also the triangular nectary is another thing that distinguishes it. There's one variety that is sometimes recognized up in extreme southeastern Washington. It's actually not too far from Lewiston, Idaho. You go across the river, you're in Washington. There's a couple white populations up there, which, it's kind of hard to really call that a variety because a lot of the other populations, like you see the picture there, Mount Shasta, they're pretty much white and very pale lavender. And also at the population up there by Lewiston, besides the white ones, you also have some pale lavender ones growing. So it's kind of weakly distinguished. Now, the third subsection is Natalyiani, and these are mostly desert bloomers. Southwestern United States is where most of these species grow. And what distinguishes this subsection are the circular depressed gland at the base of the petal, which is surrounded by a broad membrane, which is very distinct. And these are some of the species growing around the Owens Valley. Brunonis, which I'm not sure if that was named after the Bruno, Idaho up there, which it's part of their range. They grow up in southern Idaho and northwestern Nevada, and they grow down along the eastern Sierra. And you have a similar one growing down there in the Owens Valley, which grows in a different habitat. It grows in the alkali seeps, excavatus, and it's fairly rare. It's just restricted to a few alkali areas down there around the Owens Valley. And then on the bottom row there, you see Inmanustus and Panamentensis, which some people think is actually the same as Inmanustus, but Inmanustus, the photo here was from Mount Pinos down there in Central California by the Grapevine, and they're normally not so purple like this. That was a very unusually purple one. They're usually more kind of similar to Panamentensis. One of the most striking species in this subsection is Kenneth Eye, and they vary from deep red to orange to yellow, and the yellow ones are sometimes considered a variety, Munsii, but once again, it's kind of hard to really separate it because there are some populations up in Death Valley and other areas where the whole population is yellow. But then there's other areas where you have yellow, orange, and red all growing together, like you see in this photo. This is Deep Springs Valley, which is just east of the White Mountains. If you go over Highway 168 there, on a good year, you can see tens of thousands of them. These were taken in 2017, which was a very wet year, and there was early to mid-May, actually more like mid-May when they usually bloom. There'll be like tens and tens of thousands of them. If you go there like a year like this, I went by there the same time of year, I could not find one single flower. So it all depends on the year. And I really love the curly leaves on this species here, as you see in these photos. Now, I mentioned that it's mostly, the ones in this subsection are mostly desert bloomers. The exception is Calochortusclavadas, which has 5 varieties, and it's more of a Southern California coastal plant. It's very beautiful, large, showy flower. And if you look on the map there, you see that there's a cluster of dots up in the Sierra Nevada. Those are down in El Dorado and Calaveras County, and that's this variety right here, the variety Avius, which is unusual that it's found up there in the Sierras because it's a long ways from all the other varieties down on the coastal Southern California. But there's actually a lot of plants that have a connection with the Southern California, like the San Diego County that show up over there in El Dorado County, and some of them go a little further north, like Lilium Humboldtii, the Humboldt lily. There's a variety in Southern California that grows along the coast, and it's very similar to the one in the Northern Sierra that you have in Grass Valley. And also Ceanothus tomentosus, there's another variety in Southern California, San Diego County, and also Ceanothus palmeri. It shows up in El Dorado County. And so it's kind of odd that you have a lot of species with that kind of show up there in the El Dorado County. Now, a good place to see one of the varieties of Clavadas is a place called Arroyo de la Cruz. Most of the Arroyo de la Cruz is private property. It belongs to the Hearst Corporation, and if you go in there, you'll probably get shot. It's very well guarded. They don't even let botanists go in there. I know Mike Basie, when he was studying some of there's two endemic manzanitas that grow in there. He says that they wouldn't even give them permission to go in there. But there is a little coastal plain. It's about 2 miles north of the Arroyo de la Cruz bridge, and that belongs to the state of California. So you have public access there. And in this little coastal plain that you see here, you have 4 species of Calochortus growing there. You have Uniflorus, which blooms much earlier, blooms late March, early April. You have Albus, the coastal form, and Luteus growing there, and they bloom later, like late May into June. And then you have Clavadus recurvifolius, which is basically, it's just a very short form of Clavadus, which some people think, well, it shouldn't really be named as a variety because there's really no difference. It's just kind of short and grows along the ocean, which the luteus that are also growing there are very short. They're only a few inches tall. So if you're going to call the Clavadus a variety, then why not call the luteus a variety too? Because they're both very short, stunted and on the coastal plain there. And also you have Fritillaria there, one that's not too common, bifolia. And if you go at the end of March, beginning of April, you'll have the Uniflorus and the bifolia, sometimes growing by the hundreds there in this little coastal plain. Now we're going to go to the last subsection, the Genusoniana. These are not found anywhere in California. There's only 2 species in this subsection, and they're distinguished by their oblong glands and with a narrow gland membrane, and what they describe as distally branched gland-tipped hairs. And you can see the hairs here. They're kind of like unusual, like a big ball at the end of the hairs. It kind of looks like. But these 2 species are closely related. Ambiguous is restricted to Arizona, the area between Flagstaff and Phoenix there. Genusonii is much more widespread throughout the Rockies, and throughout most of its range, it has white flowers, but you go down into New Mexico on 2 different mountain ranges that are adjacent to each other. You have these purple ones here, which are near Los Alamos, and then near Santa Fe, you have these yellow ones, which are kind of pale yellow. Sometimes they're distinguished as a variety, but they're really, other than just being kind of pale yellow, they're not really any different. The purple ones have never been described as a variety, which for me, they're more distinct than the yellow ones. Now we're going to the last section, the Cyclobothra. And these are the really odd Mariposa lilies. One of the main things that distinguishes these is the thick, coarsely hairy bulb coat, fibrous coat around the bulbs. And they're very different, as you'll see here in the the pictures coming up. They're divided also, all three sections of Calochortus are divided into three subsections. These ones are also divided into three subsections. The only ones found in California are the Weediani. Those are found in from central to southern California and in northern Baja. The other three sections are found exclusively in Mexico, mainland Mexico. Down, a couple species make it into Central America. And it's interesting with those three subsections that are in Mexico. They have a completely different blooming period than all the rest of Calochortus, including that of Weediani. The ones down in Mexico, they bloom in the fall instead of late spring and early summer. And the reason for that is because in Mexico, they have a different rainfall pattern. The rains begin in the summer with the monsoon, and they peak in August, September. And then when the rains are just about over and the ground starts drying out a little bit, that's when the Calochortus bloom, which is in the fall down there. In California, it's the same thing. At the end of the rainy season is when the Calochortus begin to bloom. So it's just all depends on the rainfall there. Now, there's 18 species in Mexico that are not found anywhere in the United States, and they're all in those last three subsections of Cyclobothra. Some of them get kind of close. You see up there in Sonora and Chihuahua, and there's a couple species up in that area, but they don't make it into Arizona or New Mexico. So we're going to start with Weediani. These are found from the Bay Area. There's one species up there near San Francisco, and then all the rest are Southern California, LA, and down into northern Baja California. And Weedii, Calochortus weedii has three varieties. It's a very beautiful species, very large flower. And there's one of the varieties is called intermedius, which is down there in Orange County, right near the coast. And it shares characters from Plumeri and weedii, and it's very beautifully marked flower, as you can see here in this photo. And it's pretty variable, since they think it's probably from a hybrid origin that's kind of stabilized. So it's pretty variable. The markings can sometimes look more like Plumeri, or sometimes they can look more like weedii. Calochortus plumeri is one of my favorite species of Calochortus. It's very beautiful species, a large showy flower, very variable in its color and markings. The one, the lower left there, that's one of my favorite Calochortus photos. The marking on that flower was just incredible. That was down in the Santa Monica Mountains. And I took these a couple years ago, and I was taking pictures up by Mount Pinos there, the Nudist, and it was getting late, and so we were like rushing to get down there before it got too dark. And it was, when you got over the top of the Santa Monica Mountains, it was just a dark, foggy day. And I thought, oh great, the flowers are going to be closed. Because I didn't realize that this section of Calochortus, the flowers don't close at night, or when it gets dark and foggy and rainy. So I was very surprised to find the flowers wide open, even though it was about 5 o'clock in the evening and it was real dark and foggy. And the one at the upper left there you see the really interesting margin there, fringed margins on that one there. That was near Rancho Cucamonga. This one used to be considered a variety of Plumeri, but now it's considered a separate species, and it's very distinct. You see the very dense hair on the margin of the petals. It doesn't have that in Plumeri, and also it's a very late bloomer. It blooms. It's down there on the coast, but not right on the immediate coast. It's up higher up in the mountains, like 2,000 or 3,000 feet, where it's pretty warm and dry. And so you would think it would bloom much earlier, but it actually blooms at the end of July. It's one of the latest blooming Calochortus. And this one here, Calochortus obispoensis, is the most bizarre Calochortus. And most people don't even realize that it's a Calochortus. And you see the very reduced petals. Actually, it looks like almost like a star thistle. They can have the plant is fairly large. It could be like 2 feet tall and branched, and it could have 50 or 60 flowers on one plant. And so it's very unique Calochortus, and it grows down in serpentine areas down around San Luis Obispo. And this one here is the northernmost of any of this section of Calochortus. It's up on Ring Mountain, up north of San Francisco, Marin County. Wasn't discovered until 1971. You wonder, right there in the Bay Area, why nobody found it until 1971. Well, it blends in very well with the grasses. It's kind of yellow and brownish color, which is the color of the grass at the time of year when it's blooming. The one there, the upper right, that was I don't know if it was an albino or what, but it was a pure yellow with no markings. That it was, I saw blooming up on Ring Mountain a couple of years ago. Now, this subsection, I don't even want to try to pronounce it. Maybe Shane, he seems pretty good at pronouncing these Latin names. But this one is mostly in northern Mexico, and these look pretty much like typical Calochortus that we're familiar with. They're campanulate flowers. The sepals are fairly large in proportion to the petals, and if you saw these, most people would realize that these are Calochortus. Now, this section, Barbadi, now these are starting to look a little different. These are pretty unusual looking Calochortus. And now all these ones in Mexico, these are not my photos. Ron Parsons took a lot of these photos. I haven't seen any of these species down in mainland Mexico. I've just seen some of the ones in Baja, which are more related to the California species. And the one here, Balensis, the upper left, those 2 photos, that is an amazing plant. The flowers are huge. They're like a big ball. And that's growing way down in southern Mexico, in Chiapas and Oaxaca. And it's growing in subtropical areas down there where you would not expect to find a Calochortus. And unfortunately, they say it's one of the most dangerous parts of Mexico with the cartels that are fighting each other in that area. So it's kind of a little sketchy to go down there and visit that one. And this is the last subsection here, Purpurae. And I was telling you at the beginning that the Calochortus has a close connection with Fritillaria. Well, here's where you can really see the connection. I mean, if you saw these flowers, they look like, to me, they look like Fritillarias. In fact, they were originally classified as Fritillaria. Some of them have very little hair, which would, look like a Fritillaria doesn't have hair, but the ones that do have hair, they're mostly just along the margins of the petals. And there's 5 species down there, and mostly in central Mexico and the volcanic cross range that goes across from Mexico City over to the west there towards Guadalajara. Now, before we finish here, I just wanted to show you some interesting hybrids. These are between 2 subsections of the same section of Calochortus, from the Eleganti and the Pulcelli, 2 different subsections, Anopheles and Albus. And the one in the middle is the hybrid. These were found down in Tuolumne County. You have both of these species growing together in Nevada County. So, if you see them growing together, you should keep an eye out for hybrid. These are also in the same area there. You can see the hybrids are interesting because some of them will look more like one parent, some will look more like the other. Since both of the parents are very distinct, it's pretty easy to spot the hybrids because they're like pretty much intermediate between the 2 parent species. This is an interesting hybrid here. It's also between two subsections in Calochortus. Piculatus is the Mount Diablo globe lily. Umbellatus is also the one down there, the Oakland star tulip. They're both narrow endemics. And the only place that you have those two growing together is on Mount Diablo, and one place on Mount Diablo. And Ron Parsons found this hybrid here, which is very interesting looking hybrid between two very distinct parents. And this is one that I found up in Southern Oregon between Nudist and Tonyai, which is, it's a little harder to realize that they're hybrids, but you can kind of see the sparse hair, and it's kind of intermediate between the two. And here's this was up in the Jarbro Gap up by the Feather River area there. That's one of the few areas where you have Tonyai and Monophilus growing together. And you see these really big, pale yellow cat's ears growing up there. And you realize that it's a hybrid, because the Tonyai, the form that grows in that area, is a very large form, bigger than Monophilus, and so the hybrids tend to be larger than Monophilus, and they're this pale yellow. So that's when you see that, you go, okay, this must be a hybrid here. And Superbus and Luteus are oftentimes growing together, and a lot of times you'll see these pale yellow flowers that the markings are kind of intermediate between Luteus and Superbus. And when you get down to the southern Sierras, Kern and Tulare counties, the foothill area there, like east of Bakersfield and Fresno, there's a whole population of plants which are really intermediate between Luteus and Superbus, but you don't have either typical Luteus or Superbus there. The entire population, that whole zone, is these flowers that are pretty much intermediate between the two. And some people thought, well, maybe they should be described as a species, but I guess it's kind of hard to separate them out. On the last note here is I just wanted to show you a few oddities. Somebody posted this on iNaturalist last year. This was up near Wairika, and it's a very strange flower. It has these long horizontal sepals, erect petals, little or no hair. It's branched like Tonyai. It has it's very small, low growing flower, and it was blooming on April 26th. The person thought it was Greeneye, which is not even close. And Greeneye blooms at the end of June, like, you know, several months later. It's a very tall plant. So they told me the location up there, and I went to look for it this spring, and all I found was a Tonyai. There was a whole bunch of Tonyai there, and Ron Parsons, he was also very interested in it. And I was a little early; they're mostly in bud, so I thought, well, maybe, you know, once they all get blooming, you'll find a couple of these. And so he went up, and he couldn't find it either. But this, whatever this is, it's very interesting. And also the anthers, you notice they're apiculate, very sharp pointed, which is not like Tonyai. So, you know, well, maybe it's a mutant Tonyai without hair or something, but it has a lot of other things that are very strange about it. This was the last Calochortus that was described several years ago. This was described from down in Southern California, or from around Santa Clarita. It was, this guy says he was collecting bulbs during the end of summer when they were just dried out flowers, and he collected bulbs in two locations about 30 miles apart. And when he planted them, he said, this is what came out. It's very interesting flower. I mean, it kind of looks intermediate between Obispoensis and Plumeri, which are in the same section of Calochortus. But you know, it's kind of interesting. After they described this and published it, people have gone out looking for it, and nobody has found a single plant in the wild. There's been 2 very wet years since it was described, and so people have, like, gone. Botanists have gone looking for it, and nobody could find it. So it's kind of interesting what this might be. I'm a little skeptical about it because well, the person that found it also grows bulbs and crosses bulbs. So I don't know. I'm just, until I see it in the wild, and then I'll believe it. Anyway, that's all I got for tonight. Thank you for coming, and I hope you enjoyed it.
Hello. Thank you so much, Jeff. That was wonderful. We really appreciate it. I have several questions I'm going to read to you, and so you can provide answers if you know the answer.
That's the problem there. Hopefully they're easy questions.
Well, the first one was a location question. It was from Karen Wilkerson. What road were all those 7 species of Calochortus located on?
No,
you said there were 7.
Well, I was talking about Lily.
Oh,
yeah, it's up there off of Highway 96. It's actually just a remote dirt road, but no, okay. It's not Calochortus. It's a Lilium.
That was my mistake, not hers.
Okay.
So I apologize.
Yeah, it's Bluff Creek, I think is I can't remember the name of the road, but it's up there off of Highway 96.
So the next one is, you mentioned a triploid species or triploid. How do they reproduce asexually if they can't reproduce sexually?
I guess just the bulbs, they form little, what do you call it, the little bulblets there, and that's the only way that they reproduce.
Okay.
Vegetatively.
Okay, thank you very much. So then there was another interesting question from Karen. Are the gland distinctions, you were pointing out the oval versus square versus crescent, all the different gland shapes on flowers that were used diagnostically, are those functional or visual? Just visual.
Good question. I would imagine, I'm sure they must have some function. I mean, they're definitely visual, but what they actually, the function is of those glands, that's a good question. I can't answer that one.
Okay. And you mentioned a bloom in the Santa Monica Mountains. Do you remember what time of year that was, or you?
Yes, that was the end of June.
Okay.
That one, it was a kind of a late year, because that was the year, it was 2019 when we got all that rain. Things were blooming a little later and extended later that year because they had plenty of moisture. And actually, when I went there, it was near the end of June, and they were not actually at peak yet. There were some plants that had like 20 or 30 buds, and Ron Parsons, he went a couple weeks later, and they were in full bloom in early July.
Great. So then the last question I have here is whether, if you can name a species that would be fairly common in southern Oregon, Jackson County, possibly, on the Pacific Coast Crest Trail, not too far from Ashland. So obviously.
Ashland. That they saw one up there, or they're just.
Well, Sue didn't say if she seen one, but probably she did, and that's probably why she's asking.
Let's see what would be up there. Tonyai, which is in the Sierra, that's barely crosses into Oregon, but just on the northern tip of the Warner Mountains. Let's see what would be up there. Oh, you know what? Actually, probably the most common one up there would be Tonyai. It's very common up there. Actually, when you go over Siskiyou Summit there, before you get to Ashland, there's plenty of them there. You can pull over on the I-5 and see them on the side of the highway there. It's probably Tonyai is very common there.
Great. Okay. Someone said not like oh, Sue again said not, she doesn't think they were like Lealia. I'm probably mispronouncing that. Somebody else said,
I'm probably mispronouncing it too. We need Shane here to help us out. He's
exactly. So
I just make up pretty much my own pronunciations.
So many comments here about how beautiful the flowers are and how amazing it is to get a chance to see all these different species and subsections and subspecies and crosses and hybrids, and it's just wonderful. So thank you. We really appreciate it. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. My pleasure. Hope you enjoyed it. It's amazing genus, and every species is actually an interesting, beautiful flower, with the exception maybe of Obispoensis is the ugly duckling, but it's definitely interesting.
It's definitely. So I just put up again the note about where you'll be able to watch this on our YouTube channel. So you can catch that and save it for later, but it will also be on our website and on our YouTube channel. So you can find it there. Once again, thank you so much, Jeff. Wonderful as always. I've been very, as I said, I had the really wonderful opportunity to watch your other two shows, and you continue to outdo yourself. So thank you.
You're very welcome. Thank you for having me.
All right. Thank you very much. Good night, everyone.